Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. I'm Joe. In this video, we will be doing a playthrough, probably partial, of the game Return to the Rock Corregidor 1945. This is designed by Michael Rinella of Take Aim Designs and is published by Revolution Games. And it's an area movement game, which is typical of many of Michael Rinella's designs, and he's kind of a master at it. And this is a two-player game. It is soloable, but it was designed for two players, and there are some interesting mechanics in this one. So I'm not going to do much of a preamble. I do have a first look video if you want to see a little bit about the rulebook and the components and so on and so forth. It's not a big game, not a big footprint, not a ton of counters. The rules are fairly straightforward, very straightforward, I really should say, and the game is not difficult to understand. You can see here that the Japanese player would be sitting on that side, and I've got the counters turned upside down facing me because I'm obviously playing this solitaire. But you can see some of the tables, the night infiltration table up here, that's only accessible by the Japanese. That's only a strategy the Japanese can use. Obviously, it's a nighttime thing, but you can also see there's a sequence of play here. There's also one here. Then we have a seaborne landing table for the Americans and an airborne drop table for the Americans, as well as their invasion boxes for seaborne and airborne. One of the interesting things about this campaign was that the Americans surprised the Japanese by dropping airborne troops here on the topside barracks. So Corregidor is, of course, one of the islands in the Philippines, and it's a pretty rugged landscape, and it was a relatively quick campaign, although it took a while to mop up remaining Japanese resistance after it happened. And this happened in, I believe it was February of 1945. So yes, it's actually right on the map. You can see here February 16th through the 22nd. You have day turn and night turn. And basically it's played in impulses that alternate. So the Americans, for example, could go, and then the Japanese would go until both sides pass, in which case you would move on to the next phase. You can see you start with reinforcements. You go through the day phase, the night phase, a reorganization phase, which we'll talk about all of these phases as we go through them, and then the end phase. So as far as setup, real simple. The Japanese have several pillbox counters. That's what this guy is right here. You can take a good look at it. They are lettered, not that that really matters. And you put them on areas that have a +3 or +4 terrain modifier. So these would be the tougher terrain areas. So you can see many of the victory point hexes, such as Morrison Hill has a +3, James Ravine has a +3, Cheney Ravine has a +3, etc. The one that doesn't is the top side itself, which is where the airborne is going to land. Down here, Manja has a +4. Over here, we have Fort Mills, which is a +3, which is not a victory location. Here's Black Beach. This is where the seaborne landing is going to take place. Malinta Hill here, worth 3 victory points, has a +4. And Kaisor with a +3 and worth 1 victory point is over here on the far right of the map. There's an eliminated units box. And so we're going to start off. Now, normally we would have a reinforcement phase, but in the first turn, we don't really have a reinforcement phase because we're going to begin with the gameplay with the landings. So as you can see in the rule book right here, February 16th, special rules, 14.1 reinforcements. There's no reinforcement phase on turn 1. So after initial setup, which I've done, we proceed to the day phase. And then on movement, on impulse 1, the American player must choose an assault impulse and activate the airborne invasion box. All 7 units of the first wave must attempt to move to area 10. So this is our airborne invasion box. I've got the 7 units that land initially. He's right here at the top, and then the second wave is below them. Now you have an airborne drop table, and so you roll on this, and you get a -1 for every fresh Japanese machine gun unit in or adjacent to Area 10. We don't have any. We have a pillbox, but that's not a machine gun unit. So we do need a D6. So I have a green and a red. We'll use green for the US and red for the Japanese. I'm going to put my dice tower right here so you can kind of see it. And we'll roll our green die. And we roll against this table. And I'm going to just start left to right. It looks like we got a 4. 4 unit moves to area 10 and remains fresh. So I'm going to take this guy right here. This is the third of the 503, Company G. So we're going to put him right here. Then we're going to roll again. And we got a 1, which is unit is eliminated. So now this guy would go to the eliminated unit box. This is Company H. They're going to go to the eliminated unit box. So that's a bad one for us there. And we'll try the next one. We got another 4. We know that means safety. This would be I. And put them there. Then we got our machine gun unit. That gets a 2. Unit moves to area 10 and is flipped spent. So you have your unit here. This is our machine gun unit. And you can see the S in the corner. That indicates that they are eligible to come back into the game. We flip this over and you can see that it is, there's a stripe that indicates it's spent, which means it cannot take an action until after this turn is completed. We have 3 more to go, a couple of artillery units and an engineer unit. All of them are S units. We have another 1. So he will go to the eliminated box. Then we have the next one. We got a 4. You know that means it's okay. And finally, we have our engineer unit. Rolled a 3, which is still unit moves to area 10 and remains fresh. So, and then once we take control of something, there are control markers. There is a US side and a Japanese side. I'm going to use the US side only. In theory, everything's controlled by the Japanese unless it has one of these on it. So we're just going to put this on here for now, which gives us 1 victory point. We have a victory point track down here. So I could take this VP1 and just move it to that box to indicate that I now have 1 victory point based on controlling the top side barracks. Now, once you've completed an impulse, we have something called momentum, and you can see here, momentum on impulse 1, no die roll is made, retaining momentum is automatic. So they get a second turn, basically, or a second impulse. And then after impulse 2, if you roll a 1, you lose momentum, then you'd roll a 1 or a 2, loses momentum, and you get the drift, right? Impulse 6 and thereafter, if you roll anything but a 6, you lose momentum and the other side goes. So in theory, you can, if you keep rolling 6s, which of course is difficult from a probability standpoint, but if you can do that, you can continue your turn indefinitely, basically. So now we would switch over to our next impulse, and you have, as the US, you have basically 3 options that you can do. You have your assault, which is basically what we kind of just did. Then you have bombardment, and we have some units that can do bombardment. We have a couple of air units and a naval unit down here representing Task Force 77.3. And then you have the 5th and 13th, rather, down here for aerial attack. But you can do assault, bombardment, or you can pass. Now, if you pass and your opponent passes, the turn ends. Generally, you would probably pass if you run out of units to activate. Otherwise, you probably will want to do something with your units. So, having said all that, there are several things we can do. And I would say the next thing we probably would want to do is put more forces on the ground here, right? So again, we have Black Beach, which is where our seaborne forces are going to go. And you can see here, units move from the seaborne invasion box to Area 22, Black Beach. And then you have a seaborne landing table. And again, a die roll of 1 will be, well, I shouldn't say again, this time roll 1 means they're flipped, spent. There's an asterisk, which says an S unit is eliminated. 2 would be just flip it to spent. 3 to 6 means they arrive fresh. So let's land our units here. So this one, you can see, if we pick her up, we've got the 1st of the 34th A. company. So we're going to roll. And we got a 6, so that we know that that's good. We put them on Black Beach. Now, there would be a -1 DRM if they had a machine gun unit, but again, they don't. And then a 4 means that the next company B is okay as well. Then we'll do the next one. And that's C, I think. Or this is K, actually. Oh, this is a different one. This is I. This one's J. And then the next one will be K. I'm just going to put that right there. A 2. So 2 moves to area 22 and is flipped spent. So this would be the next one. He's spent. So we'll just put him on his flip side. Now we've got armor, and then mechanized artillery, and a machine gun. So that's a 6. That's good. He's good. And 3, which is also good. And finally, our machine gun unit gets a 2, which means they're spent. Right? So basically, they can't. If we were to try to break out and say we wanted to try to take Melinta Hill in a later impulse, we would not be able to use these 2 units. That's basically what it boils down to. All right, so now we have to roll. Since that was impulse 2, we need to roll to see if we keep the momentum. And we do. We rolled a 6. So you needed anything but a 1. We rolled a 6. Now, I think this time I'm going to move some of my units here off of, or should I bombard? Let's see. Okay, so we're going to make a move and then do combat. So the way this works is pretty simple. You can move units that are not spent into another area, and if there is an enemy unit in that area, then you must have combat. And once you determine the result of the combat, if units remain from both sides, then you would do more combat in another future impulse. But for now, we have our units here, and we have our units here. Now down here, you may see we've got some leaders, historical U.S. leaders down here. We've got Woods, Caskey, Erickson, and Postlethwaite, and Jones. And then you have a flamethrower here. The Japanese also have some. They have mortars over here. These are optional rules. But if we use the leaders, for example, as one of the optional rules, we can bring 1 per turn in. Okay, so if I use it on this impulse, like here's this, the 503rd, we have Erickson as their leader. Actually, the third of the 503rd. Sorry, we have Erickson, and then Caskey's guys are down here, and then Postlethwaite would go with these guys, and Woods goes with our reinforcements, which don't show up until turn 2 on February 17th. So let's what would be the best one to attack? Now you also get a combined arms bonus if you use 3 different types of units. So here, for example, we've got infantry, we've got artillery, we've got a machine gun that's currently spent, so we could not use that, but we have armor. So that would still be 3 if we moved all these guys up into, say, Fort Mills, or better would probably be Melinta Hill to take that area, which has 3 victory points, and you need 4 movement points to get in there, which is exactly what we have for all the units. They all have 4. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take these guys here, and you have to have a lead unit, and we'll say the armor is our lead unit. Okay, so it's a 6 for the lead unit, and then we've got 4 more units. We've got 5 from the artillery, and then 4, 4, and 4. But that's not how you add it up. The way you add it up is 6, right, our lead unit, and then each additional adds 1. So 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, then we get a +1 for our combined arms bonus, which would make it 11. And then if I move Postlethwaite in here as well, which I can do that's my 1 for this turn, that would make it a 12. Now for the defense value, so our attack value is 11. oh, we get a +1 additionally for it being a day turn. So we're at 13. Now the defense value is equal to the defense factor of any one unit of the defender's choice, which would be their lead unit. They only have one, that's the pillbox. It gets a 5. And then you add the terrain effect modifier of the area being attacked, which in this case is a 4, so that makes it a 9. Okay, and if the Americans were defending, they would get a +1 for American defense during the day phase. So what we've got now is we've got a 5 plus 4 is 9 against 13. So we're going to roll our dice, and each side gets 2. So we have 2 green for the US and 2 red for the Japanese. We roll them all together, and the US gets 9. That was a 6. And the Japanese get a 7. So you add that to the total. So 9 plus 13 is 22, and 7 plus 9 is 16. So that is a +7. And if the attacker strength is greater than the defender total, attack total, or greater than the defender total, the attacker has achieved a success. All of the attacking units are flipped to the spent side. The defender must absorb attrition points equal to the difference between the AT and DT. The first attrition must be absorbed by the lead defending unit. Okay, so basically all these guys get flipped to spent, so I'm just going to flip them over here to indicate that they are all spent. The leader does not get flipped because he's got a KIA on his reverse. Our American units are all spent, but we have to absorb 7 attrition points here. So attrition points, so they sort of eliminate 2 fresh units, and then it would flip somebody spent. So they only have the 1 unit. So flipping it spent only gives you 1 AP, 1 attrition point. You have to move it to eliminate it because it took 7, and it only takes 3 to kill it. It goes there. It's been eliminated, which means we take 3 more victory points, bringing us to 4. And we now hold Malinta Hill in addition to topside. So now we would roll again to see if we continue our turn, and anything but a 1 or a 2. And we have advantage as well. What advantage is if by the end of the turn you can re-roll 1 die. 1 die roll. So I'm going to roll here, and we get a 5, which means we can continue. Now, since these guys are all spent, I'm going to use these guys to attack, but we can't bring their leader on board because we already used that. So we're going to say that we'll make our G here as the lead unit. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. And we do get, because we have an engineer, we do get the combined arms bonus. Put a control marker in there. Okay, so we get the combined arms bonus. We got 4, 5, 6, 7. Combined arms bonus is 8. We get 1 more for the American attack in the day, gives us 9. They have 5 plus 3, which is 8. So this is a much more even combat. And it's 10-10, so we win by 1, which just means that they get spent, as do we, basically. Okay, so now we will roll again to see if we can extend again. Now we need we have a 50% chance. Anything 1 through 3. We'll end it. It's a 3. Now I can spend my advantage, I believe, to roll again. And you flip it over to show that the Japanese will have the advantage, which they would get anyway at the end of the turn. So I'm going to roll. And we got a 4 that time, so we can continue, which means I'm going to land these guys. So we just go through the same thing we went through before. We roll, and we got a 5, which is a safe landing. And we roll again, and we got another 5, which is another safe landing. And we roll again, and that's a 6, so that's a safe landing. Now we've got a machine gun unit and another artillery unit. 3 is good. And finally, the artillery. Whoops. Oh, come on, Butterfingers. 1. All right, but this is an S unit, so it will be able to come back. All right, so I'm not even going to roll. I mean, I guess I can. And it's a 3, so we would be turning it over to the Japanese. So now the Japanese turn begins. So I switch sides, and now I'm looking at the board upside down, basically. I mean, I can turn my units over, I guess. Right here, so we're standing on the Japanese side. It is still day time, so the Americans do have a bit of an advantage. Now, Japanese during daytime, they have the same things they can do as the Americans, except they don't have the ability to do bombardment. So they can assault and pass during the day. At night, they'll have the infiltration ability as well, which is on this table right here. So what we can do, though, is we've got all these units right here. You can put them on the map because they're currently hidden. So the Japanese basically have the ability to place units, haphazardly, I guess. I mean, they get to determine where to put their units, what units they want to have pop out, as opposed to having them pre-placed, I guess. You can adjust your placement based on what you need to do at any given moment. But the problem that they will have is essentially that they have to, if they place it, they can only place 1 per impulse. So let's say we wanted to put one of our 444 infantry out. Okay, the 331A. If we can put it in here with a Japanese unit, even though they're spent. We have this Japanese unit that's already here, so they would not participate in an attack were we to try to do an attack. We can also put it in an American-controlled area right there, but if we do that, then it's automatically spent. So, or we can put it somewhere else entirely. Like we don't have anybody here on the power plant, which is a victory point location, so maybe it would be better to put them here. And then just like the Americans, we have to roll for continuation, for momentum. And so anything, actually the first one is free. I forgot. First one's always free. So we can put another one out. And if you put them in an area that's controlled by the Japanese, they're active. So I could now do something with him if I wanted to. But in this case, there's really nothing to do. He's here to provide defense to this area. I could have also put him here, right? So it doesn't matter. And we're going to move on, and I'm going to place another unit, and this time we'll do this guy here, the LGU-1, and I'm going to put him in this area with the pillbox. Now we have to roll to see if our thing continues, and it does not because we rolled a 1. Now, from the Japanese standpoint, that's not great. The more you can go, the more units you can obviously place out. But in this case, that didn't work out. So that would end the Japanese impulses, and it would flip back to the Americans again, and then they would be able to do impulses until both sides. And you can continue in this way until both sides are done. Basically, until everybody's been used, and then you move on to the next. Everybody's spent, essentially, and then you move on to the next. In this case, you would move on to the night phase. And then after the night phase, you go to the reorganization phase, which is where you bring units out of this box and make them active again. And then the end phase, where you just basically clean everybody up, flip them back over, and you're ready for the next day. Okay, back to the American side. The Japanese still have the advantage. So what we can do now is I can move some of these guys in there if I wanted to, but it might be better to move them into a different area so that we would be able to perhaps do, start to try and clean up some of these other areas, right? So you have your movement cost here. So to go to top side right here, right, as from the top side barracks, that's a 1. So all 4 of these have 4 movement. So they could simply move here, and that would only be 1 movement point. and then they can move again to, let's say, maybe we move them here to Wheeler, right? Now, since we moved through topside, we can put a marker on there that we control it. It's not a victory point location, but now if the Japanese were to place a unit here, it would come in as spent. So now we have these guys here, and we've used 1, 2, 3, and they don't have the 4 it would take to move here, nor do they have the 2 to go here or here. They could, in theory, go back there, but that would be dumb. So they can't go here, 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 here. So they're basically done. So I'm gonna, do I mark them spent once they've used all their movement points? I don't think I do. I think I leave them active, but we will pass. We will pass on our next impulse because we don't have anybody active that we can do anything with. So now we'll go back to the Japanese and do their second activation here, see what they do in their impulse. Now again, they're going to start bringing units out and place them on the map. And I might just do that off camera, and then I'll point out where I put them, just to kind of speed things along a little bit because I want to get to the night phase. Okay, so they got a few things done here. We have a unit here that was placed out to help defend against presumably the American attack that's coming. We have one up here on Cheney Ravine that we put in, slightly less powerful. These two are both 333s, slightly less powerful. We put one here on Morrison Hill, right there. The power plant we placed before, and that one we placed before, and we also placed one at Fort Mills. So the Japanese put out 4 units that time before rolling a 3 and ending their impulse. So we go back to the Americans, and they don't have enough movement points, so they're going to pass. So we'll go back to the Japanese, and again, I'm going to pause, do their move, come back, show you what happened, and then we'll eventually move on. Okay, so they built up James Ravine. They built up their forces here, here, and here. And I think that's everything. Oh, Morrison Hill. Or did I do that earlier? Anyway, you can see there's some significant Japanese strength popping up here and over here as they're trying to build a defense against the Americans. Now the Americans, again, will pass. And the Japanese, I think, are also going to pass because here's the thinking. We've got units here. We could put them out, but we might be better off not putting them out and playing defense a little bit. Like I could take these guys and this guy. Well, I could take these two, which would only be a 6, and move them in here to attack. Now, the difficulty with that is you got 5, 10, 15, 18, plus 2 is 20. You'd have 6 attacking 20. That's a dead loss for sure. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to say the day turn end. We're going to flip it to the night turn. And so we're in the night phase now. Now, in the night phase, things are a little bit different. The Japanese player will begin each night phase with momentum. So they have a moment. So they have momentum, which means they get to go first. The turn marker should be flipped, so the night side is up, right? Any units that were spent at the end of the day phase do not flip back to fresh. We do have some fresh American units here. Similarly, markers that are used side faced up do not flip back to their unused side. Okay, so in the night, the attacker may choose one of assault, infiltration, or pass. So infiltration, you can select an area of their choice as the active area and may attempt infiltration. So the Americans have control of this area right here, Black Beach, right? And we have a spent infantry unit and a spent machine gun sitting there. Now, what the Japanese can do, okay, they can attempt infiltration of an American-occupied, uncontested area without initiating a mandatory attack. So this area here is still technically Japanese-controlled, but it's contested. So they would not be infiltrating into this area. However, this area or this area are American controlled and not contested. So they could infiltrate this unit into either Malinta Hill or Black Beach if they wanted to. Okay. And then you roll on your infiltration table, which is up here. So 1 is infiltration fails, mandatory attack. 2 is infiltration successful, unit is flipped spent. 3 to 6, infiltration succeeds, unit remains fresh. Right? So we could do this. Now the movement cost here is 3, and that's 4. So this one here could move here, but that would be all as far as he could move. So we're going to roll a die here for the Japanese, and I didn't move the move around to the other side here. I'm just going to roll, and we rolled a 2. So a 2 means they succeed, but they are marked spent. So they get into Malinta Hill, but they're marked spent. Okay. Now they get a second impulse. So just like the Americans, they can move, or they can actually just start placing units again. So we're just going to start placing units again, and I'm going to put D here, which goes with this guy. We're going to put him in Fort Mills. Now we have to roll, and if we roll a 1, we rolled a 5, so they can continue. Now we'll start putting, let's put these other 4s out. We want to put these guys out near the Americans, so we'll put 1 more in the power plant, and we'll roll, and if it's a 1 or a 2, they're done. It is a 4, so they can continue. And we'll put this guy, we'll put him here. Now 1, 2, 3, they would be done. They got another 4, so they can continue. Well, let's activate the power plant. And we'll go 2. And then 2 more. And assault here. Topside barracks. They've got a spent machine gun, which has a strength of 2. They'll get a +2, so that's going to give them a 4, but the Japanese will have a strength of 8. So let's do our assault here. So it's 8 to 4. And at night, for combat, I don't think there are any benefits. Combined arms, no. It really doesn't matter which one's the lead attacker because they're the same. So we'll just say it's this one, not the pink one, the tan one. And it's 8 to 8, which means the Japanese win. They had a 8 to 4 advantage, so that's 4, which means this guy gets eliminated. He does have an S, which means he'll be able to come back in the reinforcement phase. So he goes up here, and this gets flipped back to Japanese control, and these guys are spent. Now we'll roll to see if they can continue, because they would probably like to put some units back out here in the power plant area. And I rolled 2, and they rolled a 1 and a 2 anyway. So they could actually use their advantage. The other thing you can do is reset the impulse track, which I was not really tracking because I only have an impulse marker for Japan. The other side also says Japan, so neither side says American, which I guess is a misprint. So I wasn't really worrying about it. But they're gonna use this to re-roll, and they got a 6, so that worked. Now we'll put this guy here, and we'll roll again. And now anything, 5, I guess. They rolled a 6, which means they're good, so they continue. We'll put this other one out. Now we'll roll 1 more. And it's a 4, they're done. So now we would go to the American side, and as I mentioned, we have these units here, but they're not going to do anything with them. They're going to pass. So I think at this point, since we're over a half hour, I'm probably going to stop. I feel like I've given you a decent look at what the gameplay looks like. There is one more thing we could do. I could do bombardment. Basically works the same as regular combat. I could also do a bonsai charge. The other thing I didn't really show was bonsai attacks, and so I'll briefly discuss how that works, and then we'll talk about bombardment. So if you infiltrate as the Japanese, so let's say this guy successfully infiltrates in here, and to do that, of course, he'd have to roll a 3 to 6. If that happens, the Japanese player can say, I'm going to bonsai. You double the attack factor, so in this case, that would make him an 8, and the Americans would have 5 plus 2 is 7, so they'd actually have an advantage, and that's worth doing in this case, because then your odds are pretty even. You're at 8-7, you roll your 2 dice, you hope you roll higher than the Americans, and then these guys already being spent makes them more weaker, so they can, or just weaker, I shouldn't say, more weaker. You would be successful that way. So that's how that would work. Now, bombardment is pretty similar to regular combat. It's just a little bit easier. So the attack factor of, so let's say it's the naval one, right? So here's our naval counter. You can see it's got an attack factor of 8. Okay, so that's pretty strong. And then if you had a unit like, say, this one, or this, anyone that has more than 1 unit in it, you would get a +1. So that would make it a 9. So let's say we were bombarding Fort Mills. We would have a 9. And if this artillery unit, there's an artillery unit in here, if that one was active and not used, it could, and since it's adjacent, it could apply itself as a supporting artillery, which would then boost it all the way up to a 10. Then you look at the defense factors, and for the defense factor, you take the TEM of the area, so it's just a 3. So the units themselves don't matter when it's a bombardment attack. They don't matter. So the fact that this is a 5 and that's a 4, not pertinent. It's a 3. So you'd have a 10 to 3. So chances are pretty good that you would do well. Now, obviously, like I said, if you had only 1 unit there, they'd get a +1 on that, so that would make it a 4. So in this case, you would have a pretty good chance of destroying, or at least, doing some damage to the units that are in that box. So that's how bombardment works. So reinforcements. During the reinforcement phase, we'll do the Japanese first. They do a die roll. So let's say they rolled a 4. Okay, you have it, which makes it a 2, and then any fractions would be rounded up. So if it was, say, a 5, it would become a 3. So it's a 2, right? And you can take any S units that the Japanese might have, like this pillbox, right? It has an S on it, so they can bring that in during the reinforcement phase. And you can place them in any area with a +1 or +2, in addition to the 3 and 4, which was the initial setup rules. You had to put them in a 3 or a 4. Now, for the Americans, and you can't put it where another pillbox is, so you couldn't put it in the same spot with this guy because he's already got a pillbox, but you could put it here. Right? You get it. American player makes a die roll, the same thing, right? So he rolls a die, and he gets a 1. So half it is a half. It rounds up. It's still 1. So he gets a 1. And up to that number of S units for the Americans, those are armor, artillery, engineer, and machine gun units. Previously eliminated may return to play. The American player may place these units into any area on the map that's American controlled, even if the area is contested by Japanese units. So if we were having combat like this here, they could still move that in, because even though it's contested, they would be able to put the reinforcements right in there. And on turn 2, the Americans' reinforcements here in February 17th box would be able to be added as well. They are placed in the airborne invasion box, or the seaborne box, or a combination thereof. So you can put 3 of these in here and 3 in there, or you can put all 6 in here or all 6 in there, or whatever combination you want to do. The tricky part is if the Japanese player, and I didn't do this as the Japanese, but if they had placed one of their machine gun units here, or here, or here, or in this area around here, right? Like we could say, you know what, we're going to take these guys and we're going to drop them in topside, even though we have Japanese units in there. If there was a machine gun adjacent to that, then that would affect this by giving a -1 DRM, which is also the same for here. So it's, if they're in area 22 or area 10, I think this is 11, area 11 or 22, as I scatter everybody, you get a -1 on the die roll. So that's pretty much how the game plays. There's more to it, obviously, but I wanted to kind of cover the basics. I know I'm not going to be able to play the whole game for video, and I apologize. I know there are people who want to see the entire thing played out, and ideally I would have time to do that. The issue is I shoot it, and then it takes me longer to play it as I shoot it, so that slows me down, and then I have to do some basic editing, usually, sometimes more than other times. This one will be pretty basic. But that adds time as well, and then I have to post it and everything. And then each successive video I do on a game, fewer and fewer people watch it, so it becomes kind of diminishing returns. And I have a lot of games I want to play, a lot of games on my shelf of shame, which is like probably 10 shelves worth of shame. 10 shelves worth of shame. So I want to make sure I get as much content out there, apply as broad a brush as possible, I guess, is what I'm saying. So that will do it for this one. I probably will not do a second one of gameplay on this. I might do a review of it. Talk about some of the stuff that I talked about already, but explain what I really enjoy about the game. Oh, reorganization. I did forget to talk about that. The reorganization phase, the Japanese can reorganize their eliminated units, and then the American player reorganizes their eliminated units, right? So the way this works is a little different. So to reorganize previously eliminated units, you have a two-step procedure. You select any one unit from the eliminated units box. Let's say this guy right here, right? So let's say we're the Americans and we're going to bring this guy back. Okay, so you would select one, and then you permanently remove another eliminated unit from play. So basically, if you have two dead units, you can bring one back and the other one becomes permanently dead. And that applies to both sides. So that's how reorganization works. So that's an interesting twist. And you will eventually, of course, run out of forces if you keep having forces be eliminated. So that's how that works. So that was the last thing I wanted to talk about that I almost forgot to do, but I do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. I hope you found it useful, if not entertaining, or both. And we'll return for future video endeavors on my part. I do hope so. But that's going to do it. If you have anything to say, feel free to say it in the comment section, questions, etc. I will do my best to answer, but that is going to do it. We're going to wrap this sucker up. I'm Joe. This is Hexed Encountered. And until next time, as I always say, happy gaming.